Welcome, everybody, to the Mend the World podcast. I am your co-host, Cece Jones-Davis.
And I am Malika Cox. And believe it or not, we are here in Reykjavik, Iceland.
Yeah.
We have an incredible guest that we have just been speaking with. It's Eliza Reid, who is the former First Lady of Iceland and an incredible writer. She has a memoir coming out called The First Lady Next Door, a Canadian's memoir of Iceland, identity, and unexpected adventure.
She was amazing, y'all.
Incredible.
I really feel like she dropped so many jewels. We're launching this in Women's History Month, but it's not just for women. It's for all of us, right? She talked a lot about authenticity. She talked a lot about integrity. So we really want you to chime in. And I promise you, I had on a beanie because it's very, very cold in Iceland, but Rachel made me take it off. Listen in. Eliza's amazing. All right. Eliza Reid. Now, I have to tell everybody, we are sitting today with a former First Lady. We're in Iceland, okay, interviewing this wonderful woman. And I'm only calling this lady Eliza because that's the culture here. I just want everybody to understand that. We know back home we don't do this, all right?
You have to do it here in Iceland.
Right,
though.
So I'm just following the cultural norms, okay? Eliza, we're so glad to have you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me. Welcome to Iceland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's cold.
But it's beautiful.
It's all relative.
Gorgeous.
It's all relative.
It's a different kind of cold. I text my mom, I'm like, okay, this is different kind of cold.
You have to come and visit in all seasons, so you get
Yes.
to experience, different kinds of weather. But
never
don't
coming
forget to
back.
look up, and you can see the northern lights. Maybe.
We have to come
It's
back.
a bucket list for me.
We have to come
so,
back.
Yes.
Eliza, we wanted just to start with you telling us really where we are. People hear about Iceland. We're here, of course, for particular reasons that we'll get into later. But just in your own words, tell us where we are.
Yeah, here in Iceland. And, Iceland, as you can hear from my accent, of course, I didn't grow up here. I moved here when I was in my 20s. All I knew about Iceland when I was growing up was that Reykjavik was the capital because I played that computer game, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? And
yes.
I thought, I know the capital city of Iceland. It is an island in the North Atlantic. Our closest neighbor is Greenland, but very much affiliated with Europe as a whole. And I guess I could talk for a long time about the history of the island, but I'll let people maybe Google that. We have a lot of tourism these days. We have beautiful nature, beautiful, clean, safe environment. And our country, which has a population of almost 400,000 now, really places a strong emphasis on human rights, egalitarianism, peace, happiness. Not to say we always succeed, but it's good to be ambitious in these areas.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you. You have a memoir coming out, and I do want to acknowledge that you are a really good writer. Like
Thank
I was
you.
very much captivated. But also you've lived a really incredibly interesting life as well. So between those things, I think one of the things that came out for me was this concept of identity. And I really think it's important when we're talking about mending the world, because I think people will get into their tribes or their factions, but you have had many identities. And can you share some of those and what that means in walking in integrity? And I think that was one of the other things that you put integrity as kind of core in your identity. And I think that might have opened up so many different spaces. But if you would share with that.
That's very interesting how you say that. I think, as you said, I find that in life, when we're almost from the day we're born, other people impose some kind of identities on us, whether that's to do with our gender or the gender that people give us or our birth order or our socioeconomic class or whatever it is. And then as we get older, I think in order to find a sense of belonging, which really we all seek, we kind of put these identities on ourselves, whether that's the school jock or the nerd or whatever it is. And then later on, maybe it's wife or mother or parent or professional or whatever it is. And I've worn many hats over my life, but there's one thing that I found too, is that I don't necessarily like to have one specific identity or title attributed to me, because I feel like a more complex human than that, which I think most of us are. But I've been very fortunate to have been able to wear lots of different hats throughout my life. Probably most of them, I think it's fair to say, were not ones that I expected when I was young. And I think that one of the kind of positive challenges that I've had over my life is trying to feel comfortable when you get these new identities, and trying to learn how to feel comfortable in it, and also hone it to try to achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's good.
great.
You know, I think that's so important. It's so important for folks to be comfortable with the reality that we are not one dimensional, that we are complex, that we have all these layers. Because I know it is oftentimes we have this pressure of kind of fitting into a particular box, you know,
For sure.
And so I really appreciate you saying basically that we don't have to fit into a particular box, that all of these identities are who we are, and we can be all those things, everything that we are at once. That's really,
I think
important.
context and definition, you know, are also important. Like, I have always considered myself a feminist, and I'm very proud to say that. I have a lot of friends who I admire and respect who would not consider themselves feminist. And often I think of that because we have different definitions of the word, or different definitions of the term. So I think it's always important to not also put these narrow definitions, you know, on other people about what they are. And by context, what I mean is when we are, I guess, meeting new people or in different environments. And this was something that I mentioned to you before we started recording, was how when I'm listing all these identities for a presentation or in a professional context, and I'll say, for example, writer, former First Lady of Iceland, immigrant, that's a very important part of my identity, I would say. And kind of at the end, I tend to list mother and wife. Now, I mean, these are really important parts of me in my life, but they don't tend to be the most important part when I find myself having to introduce myself in a professional context. And I find that women in particular often in a professional context get narrowed down to these very kind of caregiving labels, with all of the expectations and restrictions that come with that.
Absolutely. We are in Iceland. We came to Iceland because Iceland is considered the most peaceful place in the world. And so we wanted to talk to you as folks building out a podcast called Mend the World. Malika actually had this wonderful idea because the world is not in a great place. You know, I think we obviously can look through history and know that the world has been in bad places a lot. But particularly the time that we're living in, it's not feeling great, right? And we are really feeling like folks need a sense of hope. Folks need a sense that something can be different, that there's something for us to continue to aspire to. But I wanted to ask you about Iceland being the most peaceful place, most peaceful country in the world. How do you feel like that came to be? And do you feel like peace is a cultural thing? How much does it have to do with policy making and practice? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, there's a lot of these indices where Iceland scores well that are linked, because in addition to being the most peaceful, we're closest to closing the gender gap, and we're the third happiest, and we have a high income, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these things are linked together. I would say with something like gender equality, that's kind of a conscious decision that we're going to implement policies and things that close the gender gap. Peace is a little bit more challenging, but is built on itself in the sense that Iceland is one of only 2 countries in the world that has no military.
No military.
We are a founding member of NATO, which is, of course, a military alliance. And I think we are a very important member of NATO that contributes well to that. But, you know, we have that tradition. And geographically, of course, when the world was less interconnected, being an island in the North Atlantic, we were more isolated from other types of attacks or wars that would happen when there was a lot of different pressures going on, of course. So, you know, that's not a result of policy. That's a result of happenstance, in a sense. Now, I would say that it matches one of our kind of, if you will, brand identities of Iceland, right? That we are a peaceful in environmentally friendly, progressive society. Mm-hmm. Now, if you spoke to women who live at the women's shelter here, they might not say that it's the most peaceful country in the world.
Right.
Most peaceful country means that we are highest on an index. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that there is no crime.
That there's no
here,
problem.
for example.
I kind of want to ask the question, when you look at what's going on in other countries, especially around public safety, mm-hmm. What do you think? What do Icelanders think?
Well, I mean, we look at what's going. I think a plus side is we do look at what's going on in other countries. We are very active and interested participants in the global community, mm-hmm. in the global space, multilateralists, I guess, if you're starting to use these international relations terms. The Icelandic word for stupid is heimskur, which means someone who's never left home. And I think that there's an interesting insight in some of these things sometimes, because we do pay attention to what's going on. It's very common for people to maybe move abroad and study and come back. And I think that really helps us develop understanding of the world. I hope that the fact that we top the index for peace doesn't give us a sense of feeling smug, because I think it's like so many other things. I do a lot of talking about gender equality, and I'm very quick, and I think anyone in Iceland is quick to say, just because we're at the top of the list doesn't mean that we have achieved it. Mm-hmm. And we are facing a global backlash in gender equality, in peace, in human rights, in so many areas. And that, to me, yes, it's daunting, mm-hmm. but it's also galvanizing. It also shows that the actions of every single individual can help to shift the balance.
Yeah.
That's good.
Malika, I know you talked a lot as we were preparing to talk to you, Eliza, about the work that was going on with women in the 70s here.
Yes.
When you just mentioned gender equality, I think that's a good spot to talk about that.
I think that was one of the main reasons I wanted to come to Iceland, because of the women's strike or day off, and how 90%, I believe, of women took the day off.
Yeah.
And because of that moment, there was definitely a ripple effect that would, I think, you can explain more about how that affected the gender gap, but also a little more too about the recent one, because I realized there was one in 2023, I believe.
Yeah. So in 1975, which was the year that the UN had designated for women, there was much more inequality within Iceland. And so a group of women, kind of activist, feminist women called the Red Stockings, especially, and other women's, thought, maybe what we should do is try to show the country and the nation what happens if women don't work for a day, to prove how valuable our contribution was, whether that be working in a paid job, say, as a bank teller or as a teacher, or just doing work at home. And in this era of, pre-social media and all of that, it was almost a word of mouth thing where people weren't sure how many people were going to take part. And they decided that they would have this official Women's Day off. And they called it a day off and not a strike, because some women didn't feel like they could support the idea of a strike. They thought that was too kind of socialist or too radical to have a strike. And again, I think that shows as well that people looked at the bigger picture rather than get bogged down in the minutiae of things. And people said, all right, we won't call it a strike, we'll call it a day off. And everyone said, great, I can take a day off. And so, yes, 90% of the women took this day off. Many of them gathered in the center of Reykjavik. But what happens in a country when 90% of the women don't work? Nothing happens. And nothing happened that day.
Wow.
And, the schools were closed. The planes couldn't run. They couldn't print the newspapers. The hot dogs sold out in the stores because the men didn't know what to cook. This is what my husband as a child remembers the most, is that his dad burnt the hot dogs, which is very disappointing to him. And that, and I should also say that it wasn't that all the women took a day off against rantings of all the men who thought this was awful. Of course, there were men who encouraged this and were allies in that too. Not all of them, but some of them. And it was a really positive event. It wasn't led by one charismatic leader. It wasn't, led from the left or led from the right. It was just a group of women who wanted to do their part. And it was galvanizing. It made headlines around the world, and it made people think, wow, when I do my part, it can really make a difference. And it was 5 years later that we elected the world's first democratically elected female head of state. So we had a president for 16 years here who was a woman.
Wow.
That's great.
We had a women's list first at the municipal level and then parliamentary level. And now you see in parliament and in the government, our president, prime minister, bishop of the national church, majority of cabinet, many, many other positions are women, and 46.5% of our parliament is women. So, but, there's a few takeaways from that. One is that, if you really put your mind to it and you focus on it, you can impact change.
Absolutely.
But secondly, it is easy to have a backlash, and we're not there yet. And that's why every year, every 2 years, we take more days off to remind people that we're not there yet.
Oh, wow.
And now there's more of an emphasis placed on other areas. So, for example, in 2023, when there was a day off, the emphasis was on the eradication of gender-based violence, which happens here in Iceland just as it happens everywhere else. And I don't know how we can call ourselves a gender equal society when we still have an epidemic of gender-based violence. And also to support non-binary and trans women as well, which are one of the most at-risk communities. And so again, there's kind of changes all the time, but we need to keep our focus on it because it's very, very easy to go back.
And tell me again the word for extraordinary women, because I know I will butcher it.
It's sprakar, extraordinary women. Spraki is the singular, and it's an old and obscure Icelandic word that I shouldn't say but a friend of mine dug up when I was writing a book on the extraordinary women of Iceland. But don't you love the idea, or I love the idea, that in the Icelandic language, we have a word that defines exclusively women in an exclusively positive way.
Incredible.
It's incredible.
And it's just one word.
Just one word. And it's a kind of fun word to say, right? Spraki or sprakar.
Or to butcher as I do.
That's okay.
I won't even try it.
It's the
I won't even
intention that
try
counts.
So a follow-up on that is that we're in, obviously, a place that is considered the most peaceful. It has an incredible amount of women in government, which I think there is clearly a link there. But you found yourself in a position that you didn't necessarily ask for, but obviously just carved out your own space. And I loved like the hearing and reading your story, but also it was unpaid labor. And so I guess can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a complex thing, serving as First Lady of Iceland. And, incidentally, my husband had never run for public office before, and it happened after a 7-week campaign. Wow. So it's fair to say that it was an unexpected development in my life, which is almost a good thing. It means you don't have any time to overthink it, right? Right. So it's quite fair to say that all of a sudden I was thrust onto the national stage of my adopted country that I'd moved to when I was 27 years old. And I was famous as someone's wife. Oh. And that's very strange for when we were talking about identity earlier. But of course, there is no job title First Lady or First Gentleman or First Spouse. There is a clear job description for the president of Iceland, but not for their spouse. And if there is a spouse, there nevertheless are certain, unofficial expectations that this person, who until actually in the current moment has always been a woman, will act as some kind of, hostess. Or I think when you say First Lady, a lot of people have an image in their minds of what a First Lady is. And on the one hand, of course, that's not a paid position because it isn't a real position. I wasn't elected to any position. I didn't run for any office. I didn't do anything. And for that reason, it was also important for me to keep my jobs, many of them, because I didn't want to quit my job because my husband became elected to a new job. But it was such a wonderful, unexpected opportunity and honor that I also wanted to use the opportunity to the best of my ability to serve the country and to really try to use my voice to nudge things in the right direction, for lack of a better term. And so I did want to be active. I did want to do a lot of things, and I wanted to use my voice. I thought the world has enough silent spouses who gaze adoringly at their husbands and change their clothes 5 times a day. And I don't mean that in a diminishing way.
Right.
But I thought that I could perhaps be more of use by letting people hear my voice, which in Iceland is a voice that speaks with an accent. And that to me is really important as well, that people here in the country hear that just because I speak with an accent, I make mistakes when I speak in Icelandic, that doesn't mean I don't have something important to say.
That's good.
But
What
also
were some of the topics?
Yeah.
Like, what were some of the issues that, as First Lady, were really important for you to work on?
Well, one was almost, this is very kind of nebulous, but kind of confounding the stereotypes about what first ladies are. And one of those is this impression that you have to have these issues, if you know what I mean, that you have to choose a cause to champion. And, I didn't have staff. People at the president's office, which is very small, hardworking group of people, it would help if I was called to an engagement, but there was nobody whose sole responsibility was to help me do first lady things.
Right.
And I think that, there were things that I felt I had interest and experience in that I could talk about, which were, ironically enough, I suppose, diversity and multiculturalism, or just the fact that I'm an immigrant in Iceland, gender equality, entrepreneurship and innovation, because I founded a company here, literature, because I run a writers retreat and I worked as a writer. So those were kind of quick win areas.
Of course.
But the overarching area for me was to really not perpetuate stereotypes about female spouses of male heads of state. And I thought Iceland is the place from which to do that. And so, yes, I run a writer's retreat. I love talking about Iceland's literary heritage, but I tried to avoid reading to children. It's very important to read to children. Of course, we should all be reading to children. But I was very cognizant of, say, if we went on a state visit and my husband was, quote unquote, meeting important people, of course, he's the president. That's what he should be doing. But the message of what I was doing on the other side, I wanted to make sure wasn't, say, a keep busy program or something that emphasized only traditionally kind of caregiving feminine roles. I thought, frankly, it isn't good value for the taxpayers' money, even though I was doing voluntary work. They were still covering my flight or, or my hotel, to entertain me by wandering me around places. Why not have me do a speech or meet people or help to develop context there that I can then bring back home and introduce to other people back in Iceland? So I guess the overarching idea for me was, again, to try to confound those expectations and to use this platform. Michelle Obama said in her memoir, Becoming, something along the lines of, if the press was going to follow her, she was going to take them places. And I thought, well, I have this platform. I might as well do it to follow with what I believe in. And so that was, I can't say that I woke up the next day after this happened and I'd immediately do that, because I love following rules, and there was no rule book, and that's really, really intimidating. But I always think when we have those kind of butterflies in our stomach and we feel a little bit weird about something and we're not sure, that we're probably on the right track. I think if we're not a little bit nervous about how something may play out, for lack of a better term, maybe we're not pushing ourselves enough.
That's good.
I love that.
You do authenticity clearly really well, and I want to know how you keep that, and how you raise kids to be normal as a high profile person or couple.
Well, I think that's part of the important thing, and you said a little earlier about authenticity being a superpower, and I really like that, because that's a great thing for all of us, isn't it? Because we are all unique individuals. We should all somehow be able to be our quote unquote authentic selves, who we are. And if that's a superpower, hey, we're all superheroes, which is good news, right?
That is good news.
And we can't, to me at least, I can't be anybody other than who I am. I don't know how to do it. Otherwise, I would have been a spy. But I think, that's really important to me to just, and been a guiding light is to kind of live by my own integrity, to trust my own integrity and honesty. And so when I served in this role with no handbook, I just would kind of look within myself and think, there's no rule here, but do I feel comfortable with it or not? And that was kind of my guiding light. And the same with children, to me, the number one thing with children is to tell them you love them and to show them that you love them, and to treat them with respect and to trust them unless they give you a reason not to trust them. And, our kids, that was the first thing you look at, of course, when my husband was going to run for president. But we're very fortunate, again, in Iceland that you have it's much closer to things, much more accessible. And so we thought this might give them some interesting experiences in life, but hopefully won't turn them into privileged Nepo babies.
Yeah,
so I don't think we wrecked them. I hope not.
Good, yeah.
I know we're kind of wrapping up here and just really soaking in this time. In the book, you do talk about kind of having this vision of honoring new Icelandic people, who've gotten their citizenship, and you tell us a little story about one of the things that really just impressed my heart, and I would love for people to hear about it.
It's a little bit of a spoiler in the book, but hopefully people will still read the book for me, which is fine. But
before we keep saying the book is The First Lady Next Door.
That's it.
And
Yeah.
First Lady Next Door.
And it's you'll hear all about it, I guess, in the outro. But so one of my objectives, again, when I was First Lady, I wanted to sort of highlight the growing diversity within Iceland. And at one point, we held a reception at the presidential residence for everyone in Iceland who had received Icelandic citizenship within a certain time period. Because, of course, it's a small country, and I feel like everybody at some point should have had an opportunity to go to the presidential residence. And it took a long time to be able to do it, and I was really, really happy that we had done it. We had a great, diverse group of people. One woman that I really remember having met there was a young doctor from Afghanistan who had escaped when the Taliban took over again in 2021. And I said to her, "Oh, you must have come, as usually most people do, because they have a relative who's already in Iceland, because it's not, always on people's radar." And she said, "No, I'd never heard of Iceland before." And she said, "But when I knew I had to leave, I Googled safest country for women. And this is what came up."
Wow. It's powerful.
It is really powerful and touching. And I thought that's something that we have to protect. And wow, were we ever lucky here in Iceland to have her here with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I do think as we are trying to mend the world, I do think we're trying to mend a broken arm as it's being broken. So that's kind of hard. But I do think that we have to cast vision. And so I think Iceland, I think you and your, the way you have lived your life and carved so far, you have so much more things coming out and things to do. But I think these are all visions and things that we can look to as we're building kind of a new, a new way of being in the world, which I think is whole and not fractured.
Yeah. I think that if my story can be an example for something, it's just that it's completely unpredictable. And I feel so incredibly fortunate. But it is, I suppose, that when we have these unexpected moments in life, which we all do,
Right.
even when there may be good moments, that we have to trust in our integrity and kind of lean into those uncomfortable feelings, because that's what's going to help us grow.
That's right.
And that's what's going to help us do things, and just try to maintain a curiosity in the world and the people around us, because we will be able to find those moments that connect us, those little touch points where we have some commonalities, and that is the beginning from where we work towards something else. And I really believe that we all have an opportunity to make an impact. I like to bring up my mom, who hates being in the spotlight, but I often say that during the pandemic, she just decided from the farm where I grew up in Canada that she was going to do one nice thing for someone every day, whether that was just call, check up on a friend, or bake a pie for a neighbor, or go for a walk, or give someone an extra smile at the grocery store, whatever it was. And I thought, she's not trying to change the world, but that's the kind of thing that does change the world, right? Because it has that butterfly effect.
Absolutely.
And it encourages all of us. And I think that's also invaluable, right?
That's right.
It's pretty manageable for us all to do one thing a day, isn't it?
I'm
believe
really
so.
going to adopt
Yeah.
that. You know, I think that's doable.
Right?
I'm gonna put it on a little sticky note on my computer.
Yeah.
You know, one nice thing
Yeah.
a day.
Yeah.
You know, I think
I love that.
that's accessible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So we are hoping that you will share something that brings you hope, or something that help me out here.
Feed your spirit.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah. One of the things I like to use often is kind of the unofficial mantra from that Women's Day Off that I talked about, because there was this song that everybody sang. And the chorus of the song was in Icelandic, "En þori vilja get ég, já, ég þori getu vil," which, for those of you who do not understand Icelandic, I will translate, and means, but dare I, will I, can I? Yes, I dare, I can, I will.
I
Love
dare, I
it.
can, I will.
I dare, I can, I will.
That's amazing. Eliza, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being
It
in
is
the
an
world. Thank
honor.
you for being with us today for our first Mend the World podcast episode.
End of Women's
Yay.
History Month
Yay.
in March.
There you
So,
go. It's going to
Yep.
be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we really,
so-
really appreciate it. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
I hope you have a great time with it, and I'm sure you're going to meet lots of interesting people.
And can
lots
you
of great
tell
people.
everybody, we're going to talk a lot about
Yeah.
the book and the intro, but how they can follow you, get
Yeah.
in touch with you for speaking, and
For
find out
sure.
more about your books.
Yeah, I do lots of public speaking as well. So if people want a good sort of uplifting keynote, happy to do that.
Yeah.
They just go to my website, elizareid.com,
Okay.
which is ELIZAREID. Got to give you a Canadian pronunciation there. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Eliza Jean Reid. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn. And the book is called The First Lady Next Door, a memoir of Iceland identity and unexpected adventure.
Amazing.
I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And,
you. This is
awesome.
And I'm buying your mystery books because you're such a good writer.
Yeah, I write mystery books too and other
Yeah.
books, so people can find that
Just
out.
look up Eliza, okay? She's got some good stuff for
And
you.
Z is Z for the Americans.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I guess the United States Americans.
All right, everybody. Thank y'all for joining us.
Yes.
And we'll see you next time here at Mend the World.